U.S. trade policy shift. Trump confirms new tariffs on key goods from Mexico, Canada, and China, including chips and pharmaceuticals. Date: February 1, 2025. Overview. On February 1, 2025, President Donald Trump announced a major shift in U.S. trade policy by imposing significant tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China. This decision, characterized by a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico and a 10% tariff on goods from China, aims to address issues related to illegal immigration and the trafficking of fentanyl into the United States, which Trump claims has caused numerous American deaths. Key points from the announcement. 1. Tariff details. A 25% tariff will be imposed on imports from Canada and Mexico. A 10% tariff will be applied to Chinese goods. The exact list of affected products remains unclear, but concerns regarding price increases for consumers are prominent. 2. Economic implications. Economists warn that these tariffs could worsen inflation in the U.S., as businesses may pass increased costs on to consumers, impacting various goods including gasoline, automobiles, and groceries. The tariffs raise concerns about supply chain disruptions and increased costs for U.S. manufacturers, potentially leading to broader negative economic consequences. 3. Political reactions. The announcement has faced criticism from various political figures. Democratic Senate Leader Chuck Schumer emphasized that the tariffs would adversely affect middle-class families and suggested that the administration should focus on competitive nations like China instead of allies. Bipartisan concerns have been raised about initiating trade conflicts with key allies. 4. Retaliation concerns. Canada and Mexico have signaled readiness to respond with retaliatory tariffs. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stated that Canada would take a forceful but reasonable response, while Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum emphasized their preparedness to defend Mexican sovereignty. Analysts predict that retaliatory measures could escalate into a larger trade conflict, potentially damaging economic relations between the U.S. and its neighbors. 5. Future developments. Trump hinted at the possibility of additional tariffs targeting specific sectors, including computer chips and pharmaceuticals, indicating that this move may be the start of a broader strategy to reshape U.S. trade relations. The administration has indicated that negotiations could prevent these tariffs from taking effect, similar to a recent situation with Colombia where the threat of tariffs led to diplomatic resolutions. Timeline of events leading to the tariffs. January 31, 2025, Trump announced the upcoming tariffs, linking them to drug trafficking and immigration issues. February 1, 2025, the tariffs officially took effect as outlined. Post-announcement, economists and political leaders began assessing the potential impacts, warning of inflation and retaliation from affected countries. Economic analysis. The imposition of these tariffs marks a significant escalation in U.S. trade policy, with potential wide-ranging economic consequences. The tariffs could lead to increased prices for consumers and disrupt established supply chains, affecting economic growth. Many voters supported Trump based on his promise to stabilize inflation, making this move particularly risky for his administration. Political landscape. The tariffs have drawn sharp criticism from both sides of the political spectrum. Critics argue that targeting close allies like Canada and Mexico could harm U.S. economic interests and jeopardize jobs. The risk of retaliatory tariffs from these countries could further complicate the situation, leading to a cycle of escalating trade tensions. International reactions. The international community, particularly Canada and Mexico, has expressed concern over the tariffs. Canadian leaders have warned that such measures could have disastrous consequences for U.S. jobs and prices, while Mexican officials have emphasized their commitment to defending national sovereignty. China's response is anticipated to be aggressive, given the history of retaliatory actions during previous tariff conflicts. Conclusion. The new tariffs imposed by the Trump administration signify a dramatic shift in trade policy that could have lasting repercussions for the U.S. economy and its relationships with key trading partners. As the situation unfolds, the effectiveness of these tariffs in achieving their intended goals, curbing illegal immigration and drug trafficking, will be closely monitored alongside their impact on consumer prices and international trade relations. The administration's approach reflects a transactional strategy in trade relations using economic measures to pursue broader political objectives. The coming weeks and months will be crucial in determining the outcome of this policy shift and its implications for both the U.S. and its trading partners. The announcement of new tariffs by President Trump on February 1, 2025 presents several counterintuitive aspects that challenge conventional economic reasoning. These tariffs, set at 25% for imports from Canada and Mexico and 10% for those from China, are positioned ostensibly as measures to address illegal immigration and drug trafficking, particularly fentanyl. However, several implications arise that defy traditional expectations regarding trade policy and economic impact. 1. Inflation versus economic growth. Economists typically argue that tariffs raise prices for consumers, leading to inflation. The expectation is that increased costs for importers will trickle down to consumers, resulting in higher prices for a wide range of goods. Yet Trump's administration seems to suggest that these tariffs could bolster domestic manufacturing and ultimately lead to economic growth. This creates a paradox. While tariffs are expected to induce inflation, the administration hopes they will simultaneously stimulate economic growth by protecting domestic industries. The counterintuitive belief that tariffs can lead to both inflation and growth challenges standard economic theories that suggest protectionism typically harms consumers while benefiting producers in the short term. 2. Targeting allies versus competitors. Traditionally, trade policies focus on addressing imbalances with competitors rather than allies. The imposition of tariffs on Canada and Mexico, two of the U.S.'s closest trading partners, contradicts this norm. Analysts, including Senate leaders from the Democratic Party, have criticized this approach, arguing that it undermines relationships with allies while failing to adequately address the more significant trade issues posed by countries like China. This raises the question of whether the administration genuinely believes that punitive measures against allies will yield the intended cooperative results regarding immigration and drug trafficking, thus defying the expectation that diplomatic negotiations should precede economic sanctions. 3. Retaliation and broader trade conflicts. The expectation in economic policy is that retaliatory tariffs will follow aggressive measures, leading to a trade war that harms all parties involved. However, Trump's administration appears willing to proceed with tariffs despite clear warnings of retaliation from Canada and Mexico. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum have indicated their readiness to respond with tariffs of their own, which could escalate into a larger conflict. The counterintuitive aspect here is the administration's apparent disregard for the potential long-term consequences of these tariffs, including the risk of a mutually damaging trade war that could ultimately hurt American consumers and manufacturers alike. For short-term versus long-term economic strategy, the administration positions these tariffs as a mechanism for achieving immediate political goals, namely curbing illegal immigration and drug trafficking, rather than as a long-term economic strategy. This prioritization of short-term political gains over long-term economic stability is counterintuitive, as successful trade policies historically rely on stable, predictable relationships between trading partners. By using tariffs as leverage for political negotiations, the administration risks creating an unstable trade environment that could lead to longer-term economic repercussions. 5. Consumer impact and political promises. Trump's administration has campaigned on promises to reduce inflation and support the middle class. However, the imposition of tariffs is likely to raise consumer prices on essential goods, contradicting these promises. The expectation that tariffs will somehow not affect consumers significantly contradicts historical evidence where similar measures have led to increased costs. This presents a counterintuitive scenario where an administration focused on populist economic policies may inadvertently harm the very demographic it aims to protect. 6. Economic theories on tariffs. Traditional economic theory posits that tariffs are detrimental to economic efficiency since they distort market prices and allocation of resources. The expectation is that tariffs will lead to a decrease in overall economic welfare. However, the administration seems to be operating under the belief that targeted tariffs can selectively protect certain industries while still allowing for overall economic growth. This selective application of tariffs challenges the notion that all tariffs are inherently damaging, suggesting a more nuanced view of trade policy that relies on the belief in American exceptionalism and resilience. In conclusion, the counterintuitive elements of Trump's tariff policy reveal a complex interplay between political objectives and economic consequences. The expectation that tariffs will achieve simultaneous goals of protecting domestic industries while avoiding inflationary pressures and maintaining strong relationships with allies is fundamentally at odds with established economic principles. As these policies unfold, the real-world implications will likely challenge the administration's optimistic projections and further complicate U.S. trade dynamics. The new tariffs announced by President Trump on key goods from Mexico, Canada, and China represent a pivotal moment in U.S. trade policy that warrants close examination. While many discussions focus on the immediate economic and political implications, several crucial aspects of this report are likely to be overlooked, yet they hold significant long-term consequences. 1. Underlying political motivations and their implications. The tariffs are framed as a response to illegal immigration and the trafficking of fentanyl, issues that resonate with Trump's voter base. This targeting suggests that trade policy is being weaponized for political leverage rather than purely economic reasons. The significance of this approach lies in the potential for future administrations to adopt similar tactics, blurring the lines between trade and domestic policy. If trade measures become a tool for achieving political goals, it could lead to a more unpredictable and contentious global trade environment. The focus on political motivations over economic rationale may also alienate traditional allies, complicating diplomatic relationships. 2. Potential for escalating trade conflicts. While the report mentions the risk of retaliatory tariffs from Canada and Mexico, it underestimates the broader implications of escalating trade conflicts. These tariffs could trigger a series of retaliatory measures that spiral into a full-blown trade war, reminiscent of the conflicts from Trump's first term. Analysts suggest that if Canada and Mexico respond with their own tariffs, it could lead to significant disruptions in supply chains, negatively impacting U.S. manufacturers, consumers, and potentially leading to higher inflation. The interconnectedness of global trade means that even minor tariffs can have ripple effects across various sectors, affecting everything from agriculture to technology. The long-term consequences could involve a re-evaluation of trade agreements and alliances, fundamentally altering the landscape of international trade. 3. Impact on consumer prices and inflation. The report highlights concerns about rising consumer prices due to the tariffs, but it may not fully capture the extent of this impact. Economists predict that the inflationary pressures could lead to a significant rise in prices across a broad spectrum of goods, not just the targeted imports. A 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico could lead to price increases for essential goods, including food, fuel, and consumer electronics. This situation could disproportionately affect middle-class families, contradicting Trump's claims of prioritizing their economic interests. The anticipated rise in inflation could strain household budgets and contribute to overall economic instability, making the tariffs not just a trade issue but a pressing domestic concern. 4. Long-term economic strategy and global competitiveness. The decision to impose tariffs appears to be part of a broader economic strategy aimed at boosting domestic manufacturing and reducing reliance on foreign imports. However, this approach could undermine the long-term competitiveness of U.S. industries. Economists argue that trade barriers can hinder innovation and efficiency. as companies may become complacent without the pressures of competition from abroad. The focus on protectionism may provide short-term benefits but could stifle the growth of industries that rely on global supply chains. The shift towards isolationist policies may also affect the U.S.'s ability to negotiate favorable trade terms in the future, as allies might be less inclined to cooperate with a country that employs aggressive trade tactics. 5. Specificity of targeted goods and market reactions. While the report mentions that specific products affected by the tariffs are not fully detailed, this ambiguity is significant. The lack of clarity regarding which goods will be targeted creates uncertainty in the market, which can lead to volatility. Companies and consumers are likely to react to this uncertainty by adjusting their behaviors. Businesses may stockpile goods, while consumers may alter their purchasing habits in anticipation of price increases. This reaction could exacerbate inflationary pressures and lead to further disruptions in supply chains. The ambiguity around targeted goods also suggests that the administration may be using tariffs as a negotiating tool, creating leverage in trade discussions while keeping stakeholders guessing about the extent of the impact. 6. Geopolitical ramifications. The announcement's geopolitical implications are profound and often overlooked. The focus on China, Canada, and Mexico indicates a potential realignment of U.S. foreign policy priorities with an emphasis on confrontation rather than cooperation. This shift could strain relationships with allies and create a more adversarial global environment. If the U.S. continues down a path of protectionism, it risks losing its leadership role in international trade, which could embolden rival nations to pursue aggressive economic strategies. Additionally, the potential for a realignment of supply chains away from the U.S. to other countries could have lasting effects on U.S. global economic standing. Conclusion. The new tariffs imposed by President Trump on key goods from Canada, Mexico, and China are not merely a reaction to present challenges, they represent a strategic pivot in U.S. trade policy with far-reaching implications. The intertwining of economic and political motivations, the potential for escalating trade conflicts, the impact on consumer prices, long-term economic competitiveness, market reactions, and geopolitical ramifications are all critical elements that warrant deeper examination. By understanding these dimensions, stakeholders can better navigate the complexities of this evolving trade landscape and its potential consequences for the U.S. and the global economy. 1. Economic implications of tariffs. The announcement of new tariffs by President Trump raises significant concerns about the potential for increased inflation and economic disruption in the U.S. The imposition of a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico and a 10% tariff on Chinese goods is expected to lead to higher consumer prices across a range of products. Economists warn that costs are likely to be passed on to consumers, affecting essentials such as gasoline, groceries, and automobiles. Additionally, these tariffs could disrupt supply chains and increase operational costs for U.S. manufacturers, potentially leading to broader macroeconomic consequences, including slowed economic growth and increased inflation rates. The anticipated rise in consumer price inflation could reach between 3% and 4%. Significantly impacting middle-class families who already face economic pressures. Furthermore, the economic fallout may not only affect domestic markets but could also ripple through international trade relations, causing tensions with key trading partners. 2. Political reactions and bipartisan concerns. The trade policy shift has prompted a strong backlash from various political figures, highlighting the risks of initiating trade conflicts with crucial allies. Democratic Senate Leader Chuck Schumer criticized the tariffs, arguing that they would harm middle-class families, and suggested that the administration should focus on competitive nations like China instead of alienating allies like Canada and Mexico. The political landscape surrounding these tariffs illustrates a broader concern about the administration's transactional approach to trade, where economic measures are used as leverage for political concessions. This approach may lead to divisions not only between political parties but also among the public, as the implications of such tariffs are likely to be felt across diverse sectors of the economy. 3. Retaliation and escalation of trade conflicts. The potential for retaliatory measures from Canada and Mexico poses a significant risk of escalating into a larger trade conflict. Both countries have indicated their readiness to respond with their own tariffs if the U.S. goes ahead with its plans. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum have expressed their willingness to defend their nation's economic interests and sovereignty. The possibility of retaliatory tariffs could create a cycle of escalation that harms economic relations, leading to a trade war reminiscent of the previous tariffs imposed during Trump's first term. The implications of such a conflict could be severe, impacting not only the economies of the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, but also potentially affecting global trade dynamics and economic stability. 4. Long-term strategy and future developments. Trump's announcement suggests a broader strategy aimed at reshaping U.S. trade relations with implications that could extend beyond the immediate tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. The administration has hinted at additional tariffs targeting sectors such as computer chips and pharmaceuticals, indicating that these measures may be part of a larger plan to leverage economic pressure to achieve political goals. The potential for further tariff announcements creates an atmosphere of uncertainty in international markets, leading businesses to reconsider their supply chains and investment strategies. Additionally, the administration's willingness to negotiate and offer concessions, as seen in previous instances with Colombia, suggests that the tariffs may be used as tools for diplomatic leverage, further complicating the landscape of U.S. trade policy moving forward. The effectiveness of this strategy will depend on the administration's ability to navigate complex international relations while balancing domestic economic concerns. 1. Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. This act raised U.S. tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods, aiming to protect American industries during the Great Depression. The tariffs prompted retaliatory measures from other countries, leading to a significant decline in international trade and worsening economic conditions globally. The act is often cited as a cautionary tale about the dangers of protectionist trade policies. 2. U.S.-China Trade War 2018-2020. Initiated by the Trump administration, this trade conflict involved a series of tariff increases on Chinese goods, beginning with 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. China responded with its own tariffs on U.S. products, leading to escalating tensions and economic impacts on both nations. The trade war aimed to address issues such as trade imbalances and intellectual property theft, but resulted in higher prices for consumers and disruptions in global supply chains. 3. NAFTA renegotiation and USMCA 2018-2020. The North American Free Trade Agreement NAFTA was renegotiated under President Trump, leading to the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement USMCA. The administration sought to address trade deficits and labor issues, particularly in the automotive sector. While the USMCA was framed as a modernization of trade relations, it included provisions that could be leveraged similarly to tariffs, reflecting a transactional approach to trade policy. The recent announcement by President Trump regarding new tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China marks a pivotal moment in U.S. trade policy. As these tariffs come into effect, several future outlooks can be anticipated based on current economic, political, and social dynamics. Economic impact. 1. Inflation pressures. The 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico, alongside the 10% tariff on Chinese goods, is likely to exacerbate inflation in the U.S. Consumers may see significant price increases across various sectors, including energy, automotive, and food. Economists predict that inflation rates could rise by 3% to 4%, compounding existing economic pressures on middle-class families. This scenario might compel the Federal Reserve to adjust monetary policy, potentially leading to higher interest rates to combat inflation. 2. Supply chain disruptions. The tariffs could lead to substantial supply chain disruptions as manufacturers attempt to navigate increased costs and sourcing challenges. Companies reliant on imports for essential materials such as pharmaceuticals and technology components like chips may face production delays, impacting overall economic productivity. The shift in trade dynamics could prompt businesses to reconsider their supply chains, possibly leading to a trend of reshoring or diversifying suppliers. 3. Retaliation and trade conflict. Trade relations with Canada and Mexico may deteriorate, leading to retaliatory tariffs that could escalate into a broader trade war. Canada and Mexico have signaled their potential responses, which could target U.S. exports, particularly in agriculture and manufactured goods. If a tit-for-tat trade conflict ensues, the U.S. economy may experience significant downturns, particularly in sectors that heavily depend on exports. Political ramifications. 1. Domestic political fallout. The tariffs may have considerable implications for Trump's political capital. While his base might support the aggressive stance on trade, backlash from moderates and impacted industries could weaken his position. This discord could manifest in upcoming elections as voters react to rising costs and economic instability. 2. International relations strain. The imposition of these tariffs will likely strain diplomatic relations not only with Canada and Mexico but also with China. The U.S. might find itself increasingly isolated as allies question its commitment to cooperative trade practices. As countries explore alternative partnerships, the U.S. could lose out on valuable trade agreements and economic collaboration opportunities. Technological and strategic shifts. 1. Focus on domestic manufacturing. In response to the tariffs, there may be a renewed push for domestic manufacturing initiatives. As companies face increased costs for foreign goods, investing in local production could become more appealing. This shift may lead to job creation in manufacturing sectors. But the transition will take time and may not fully offset job losses in industries reliant on imports. 2. Technological adaptation. Companies might accelerate investment in technology and automation to mitigate the impacts of increased labor and material costs resulting from tariffs. This could lead to a technological arms race in manufacturing, where firms seek to enhance efficiency and reduce dependency on foreign supply chains. Long-term projections. 1. Evolution of trade policy. The current scenario may signal a long-term shift in U.S. trade policy towards more protectionist measures. Future administrations, irrespective of party affiliation, might adopt similar strategies, viewing trade as a tool for achieving broader political goals. 2. Global trade dynamics. The emergence of trade blocs and alliances may become more pronounced as countries seek to mitigate the impact of U.S. tariffs. Nations may strengthen ties with other partners to create more favorable trade environments, potentially sidelining U.S. interests in global markets. 3. Consumer behavior changes. As consumers adapt to rising prices for imported goods, there may be a significant shift in spending behavior. Increased awareness of sourcing and a preference for domestically produced goods could arise, influencing market trends and consumer loyalty. Conclusion. The imposition of new tariffs by the Trump administration marks a critical juncture in U.S. trade relations, with far-reaching implications for the economy, politics, and international relations. As the situation unfolds, businesses, consumers, and policymakers will need to navigate a rapidly changing landscape characterized by inflationary pressures, potential retaliatory measures, and a fundamental rethinking of trade strategies. The effectiveness of these tariffs in achieving their intended goals remains uncertain, and the broader consequences will likely be felt for years to come.